art is laughter that relieves us from life's griefs. I truly believe that a well-made vessel of pottery has a therapeutic effect, and I think all art does. Our family's been in this area for about 140 years. We're in our third year here on Abilene Street. It's been great. My wife does all the interior of the gallery and places the pieces, and all I do is work with the clay. This is the oldest street in America, they say, Abilene Street. My father was born here in 1904. My grandfather had a business here. When I look out the window sometimes, it's like I could almost see my father come down this old street when he was a child, because he used to play downtown, because they lived downtown. I put the clay in my hands when I was 50, because before that I was working in the corporate world and raising children and sending them to college. And truly I wasn't ready until I was 50. But when I put the clay in my hands, it had been waiting on me. I could feel that. And it's the most wonderful thing that I've ever done. And I think that my whole life before that was preparing to work in the art of clay. My kind of work, which is hand building the ancient way, the old coil method, and burnishing with a stone for hours to put a luster on the clay, because I use no glazes and I use no wheel. So my intent is to do it as if I was making pottery 6,000 years ago. No one teaches that. You can take pottery in college. I took all the drawing classes in college because I thought I was going to be a painter and I needed to know how to draw. But what I do cannot be learned. You have to learn it by going to the museums, like the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. I go every year and look at the old Egyptian pottery that's very much like mine, and it's 6,000 years old. And I look in those old pieces and I can see the thumbprint of the potter, and it just gives me a special feeling to do that. And then Dina and I go to Santa Fe and Taos, or at least we used to, every year, and I would spend days in the museums, and I would go out to the pueblos, and because they're truly the only people now in America that are really consistently keeping the old art alive of hand-built clay. There are not many people over here on the East Coast that do what I'm doing. For me, and I can only speak for myself, if it takes 3 or 4 weeks to make a piece, you truly put yourself into it. Your creative instincts flow into the pieces. And I don't know how it is to build with a wheel, because I watch that process and it's almost immediate. I mean, they can build a pot in a matter of minutes sometimes if it's not a large piece. And for me, I need to do it the old way. It's not for young people, because young people usually don't have the patience to sit hour after hour and week after week to make one piece. So it's good for me, and I'm not saying it's good for everyone, but for me it's perfect. If it has the right chemical composition, it will get very black, and you'll see in a minute what I mean. Some of the most beautiful pottery I've ever seen is black pottery. And that's another thing I wanted to do. And you can see here in the gallery, there's a lot of black pottery. But every piece starts with one coil. And you just roll it with your hands and put down a coil. You may be able to do 2 coils a day if the humidity's right, because before you can put another coil on, you have to wait for it to dry so it will hold the next one. If you go too fast, you'll end up with a pancake. It collapses. So coil after coil after coil for 3, maybe 4 weeks on large pieces. And then you let it, if the piece is going to be burnished, if I want it to be shiny, I won't use glazes. I use a little stone and I'll burnish. So when the clay dries a little bit, I can put my hand on it and tell when it's ready to be burnished. So some of these pieces I spent 8 hours sitting in a chair burnishing this piece. So it gives it a nice low luster. It's not glassy looking, to me, like glazes. So that's the process. You have some idea about what you're doing sometimes. Sometimes the clay has its own idea about where it wants to go. So it's truly a relationship with the clay. We let it sit for 4 weeks. Here in Florida with a high humidity, I never take a chance, because if you have residual moisture in the clay and you put it in a kiln up to 1800 degrees, it's going to turn to steam and blow the pot out. So I let it dry for 4 weeks and then I fire it. And if I want it to be black, after the firing process, I let it cool down to about 1000 degrees Fahrenheit if I want it black, and put it in, take it out of the kiln with my hands, with my heavy gloves, at 1000 degrees, and put it in sawdust, and it ignites the sawdust. And the hot clay just pulls the carbon right in. In 22 years of building pots, usually by accident at firing, you learn new things. I found out if I didn't let the piece cool to 1000, but let it go down to, say, 800, it'll come out a beautiful bronze color instead of the black. If you want the pieces to have a variation of colors, then after you fire it, you can put it in a bonfire, and you break about 30% of those, because you can't control a bonfire. It heats and cools, and it'll have dark spots on it from smoke, and it'll have beautiful orange and yellow areas from the flame. So the Pueblos call that fire cloud, and I have a whole table full of those pots here. So, and then if you want it to be dark on the bottom and light on the top, you can just nest it down into the sawdust and let the smoke make the bottom black and make the top a lighter color. So you learn by making mistakes. That's life. We all do that. For me, clay has been a mystical journey. You know, I started out meditating when I was young. In my 30s, I was into meditating and getting in the lotus position. And I have found that working with the clay is the most meditative thing that anyone could do. When I get stumped on a piece and I don't know what the next step is, I internalize that, think about all the details, and then put it away. And when you put it away, your subconscious keeps working on it. And then about 3 o'clock at night for me, bing, the answer comes. And this design will just come floating by. And that's why all these pots are different, because I go through that meditative process, and you have to be open. You can't be worried about other things and stressed. But when you do that, you can see the result. We do art walk every first Friday. We'll have 400 or 500 people in here on a good night. And it's amazing how much educating I do of people that come through the door every day. They know there's something going on here, but they don't understand what. And it's not just the clay, it's also the paintings. And this beautiful custom furniture. It's all art. And I try to do my small part in educating people to how art can enhance their lives. They need to see how it's produced, and then they can look at the finished product. And I sit here every day in the window. Sometimes I work outdoors, and people are just fascinated because they have no idea about three-dimensional clay that's just made by hand. It's just almost not done over here on the East Coast. So it's a lot of fun. When I walk in that beautiful entrance to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, I forget all of my stress. You're surrounded by world-class art, and until I go back out the door into Central Park, you just forget about life's problems. And I think that's why art. That's why we have to help art to grow. We have to teach it to our children. Because our family's been here so long, and we love St. Augustine so much, we would love, and our goal is to do everything we can to bring the art up in St. Augustine. And before I'm out of here and gone, I would love to see St. Augustine become a destination for art.